I wrote a book called Explanations and Corrections in the Gospel of Luke, and one of the chapters is called English Mistranslations of Daniel 11:31 and 12:11, and this is part one of an explanation of how they are wrong, and in actual fact those verses probably referred to armies when they were first written. But I had to rely upon a concordance because I don't know any Hebrew or any other Semitic language. And I'm going to put information in the comments, but if I advise anybody that watches me to download Young's Concordance, I'll put in the page numbers I looked for, or use other Bible study tools that will give you insight into the Hebrew words that are used. This book is about Luke and about his interpretations of Daniel, but I have to make numerous digressions to defend him. Mistranslations of Daniel 11:31 and 12:11 lead people to believe that the abomination is an idol, not a beast or army. In this chapter, I maintain that English Bibles mistranslate Daniel 11:31 and 12:11 in a prejudiced and indefensible manner to make the reader think that the abomination of desolation is an idol. And I showed that if the Hebrew verbs in those passages were translated as in 2 Chronicles 17:2, the reader could understand the abomination of desolation as armies, the same way that Luke interpreted the expression. English Bible translations usually translate Daniel 11:31 and 12:11 with verbs like set up and place, giving the impression that the abomination of desolation is something inanimate. The translators are inclined to interpret the abomination of desolation as an idol because of traditional interpretations. Because of the way those two passages are worded, a reader indoctrinated by translators will think that the abomination of desolation of Daniel 9:27 and also in the gospel verses that contain the expression is an idol or altar. English speakers don't speak of beasts or armies being set up, but they can easily imagine that Daniel 11:31 and 12:11 are about idols when they read an inaccurate translation of the verb. I contradict the traditional interpretation in this book and say that the abomination of desolation of Mark 13:14, Matthew 24:15, and Daniel 9:27 is the abominable Roman army, Daniel 9:26 and Luke 21:20, which is equivalent to the abominable desolating beast of Daniel chapter 7. Luke simply eliminated the obscure metaphor of the fourth beast and substituted its meaning armies in Luke 21. The Hebrew verbs used in the two passages under discussion support Luke's interpretation. Whether they're aware of it or not, translators are influenced by 1 Maccabees 1:54, which is 1 Maccabees 1:57 Douay, which says in the Douay, on the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year, King Antiochus set up the abominable idol of desolation upon the altar of God. That verse does speak of setting up the abominable idol of desolation. But I say in this book that 1 Maccabees should have no influence upon the interpretation of Daniel. The author of that book may indeed have been suggesting an interpretation for the book of Daniel, but if so, he was wrong. Here are a few translations of the many, here are a few examples of the many wrong translations. Daniel 11:31 American Standard Versions. And forces shall stand on his part, and they shall profane the sanctuary, even the fortress, and shall take away the continual burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that maketh desolate. So that sounds like it's talking about an idol if you're predisposed to believe that because of a line of interpretation begun in the books of the Maccabees. And to save time, I won't read these entire verses, but notice that in the Jewish Publication Society translation of Daniel 11:31, it says, "And they shall set up the detestable thing that causeth appallment." So they chose the verb to set up. And then in the other verse under discussion, Daniel 12:11, the Jewish Publication Society translated the detestable thing that causes appallment set up. And the Geneva Bible in Daniel 12:11 speaks of the abominable desolation set up. And you can look up other Bibles. Brenton's translation of the Septuagint, the Douay, and other translations also say set up in Daniel 12:11. The Hebrew verb in these verses of Daniel that some translators render set up can be used in several senses, but it does not mean to set up. The verb Nathan, that pronunciation I got online, but I wonder if it's actually not Natan or something like that. But I'm just going to call it Nathan because that's what they say online under pronunciation. The verb Nathan is not used for the setting up or construction of altars or idols, but translators have become convinced that it means to set up or to place because of the influence of the books of the Maccabees. The most common meaning of the verb Nathan, which is used in these passages in the book of Daniel, is to give. This must be why Young's literal translation says the given out of the desolated abomination in Daniel 12:11. Here is one of 6 occurrences of the verb from the book of Daniel alone, listed in Young's 1881 Concordance under the heading Give to, under the very long section for signification number 10, to give Nathan. So in Young's Concordance, you look up the word according to the English word. To look up the verb to give, you look up give, comma, to, and because a lot of different Hebrew verbs are used, there's different signification numbers. Now, this is one of 6 occurrences of the verb from the book of Daniel. Daniel 1:12. Let them give us pulse to eat and water. So the verb simply means to give most of the time. Young devoted several pages with hundreds of what he called parallel passages that used the verb Nathan in this sense. There are other occurrences of the verb Nathan used in the same sense in Daniel, but I will omit them to save time and list the entries from Young's Concordance for the 2 occurrences that supposedly, in the imagination of translators anyway, describe setting up or placing the abomination of desolation. Even though Robert Young didn't say set up in this verse in the YLT, Young's literal translation, his 1863 translation, he lists Daniel 12:11 all by itself under signification number 6 under the heading set up to, because his concordance is based on the King James Version, not based on his own translation. So that signification number 6 reads, to give up or forth Nathan, in the illustrative passage or parallel passage that he lists is Daniel 12:11, and the fragment of the verse that he listed from the King James Version is abomination that maketh desolate set up. So the verb Nathan, meaning to give, was used in Daniel 12:11. The King James Version and many other translations translated it as set up. Notice that Young gave only this one passage where Nathan means set up in signification number 6. There are no other occurrences in the Hebrew Scriptures besides Daniel 12:11 where the verb Nathan has the same meaning. And I mentioned earlier that Young needed several pages of fine type to list the verses where Nathan means give. Should we believe the translators who give this verb a unique and otherwise unattested meaning in Daniel 12:11? My answer is no, we should not. This is suspicious since other Hebrew verbs are found under Young's heading set up to, which are regularly used in the King James Version to mean to construct or to set up right. For example, see signification number 4 under the same heading, a little above Young's unconvincing entry for Daniel 12:11. A different Hebrew verb, natsab, is used by the King James Version in Genesis 35:14, Joshua 6:26, 1 Samuel 15:12, 1 Kings 16:34, 2 Kings 17:10, and Jeremiah 31:21 for setting up a stone pillar, gates, a place, which means a monument according to commentaries, images, sacred groves, waymarks, or guideposts, etc. Why didn't the author of Daniel 12:11 use this verb natsab instead of Nathan in Daniel 12:11? The problem was not that the author of Daniel 12:11 spoke poor Hebrew and used the wrong word by mistake. The author of the passage simply was not saying what translators wish he had said. He didn't mean that the abomination was set up, and Nathan simply does not mean to set up. If the author of Daniel 12:11 would arise from the dead and read our translations and commentaries, he would think that our translators are crazy. But some commentators think that Matthew 24 refers to the setting up of the abomination of desolation, not in the sense of setting up idols, but in the sense of lifting up Roman ensigns or standards. Consider signification number 5, which is between the two headings I have mentioned, all of them in the same column and on the same page under Young's heading set up to. Signification number 5 is about yet another Hebrew verb meaning to set up, nasa. Young's entries from the King James Version are as follows. Number 5, to lift up, nasa. Isaiah 11:12, he shall set up an ensign for the nations. Isaiah 45:20, that set up the wood of their graven. In the next fragment of a verse, Jeremiah 4:6, set up the standard toward Zion, retire. 6:1, and set up a sign of fire in Beth Haccherem. 52, set up a standard, publish and conceal. 51:12, set up the standard upon the walls of B. 51, Jeremiah 51:27, set ye up a standard in the land, blow the. If the abomination of desolation referred to the Roman idolatrous ensigns, wouldn't nasa have been the appropriate verb? As you can see from the illustrative passages for signification 5 above, nasa was used for ensigns, wood of graven images, standards, and signs. But the reason nasa does not occur in Daniel 12:11 is that the author of these passages knew what the abomination of desolation was, and it was not an ensign or anything else that is lifted up. The abomination of desolation was what Luke said it was. And I'll continue this in the next video.